But I learned very quickly that to be successful and to move any of these ideas forward and explore them, like you just like people are a huge part of that, and being able to pitch an idea is hugely important.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wisenetix Podcast episode. Our guest speaker here today with us is Kate Chamberlin. Kate is the Business Development Manager at AgSource, and she's going to be sharing a lot of cool stuff about her background, but not only about that, also about communication, which became her background as well. But yeah, Kate, welcome to our conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. Kate, we always like to start the conversation learning a little bit more about our guest speakers. So please share a little bit about yourself, your background, and who is Kate?
Sure. I think my most fun fact is that I'm the daughter of first-generation farmers, right? So I have a strong background in learning by doing and maybe learning the hard way. But I highly credit my parents to all my success. They're just incredible people, both very creative in their own right. But it was really them that sparked my love for cattle and the cattle industry. I can very vividly remember the day that my dad picked us up. I think I was in first grade. My sister was in kindergarten, and he told me, I have a little surprise for you. I have someone I'd like you to meet out in the barn. And I remember as a kid thinking, like, what on earth? There's this person out in our barn. And walk out there, and he had bought us a shorthorn heifer. And that was really the start of us owning a herd, learning about the ins and outs of the beef industry at that time. We had a grazing beef herd. But that's the only reason I was able to go to a Big Ten university and pursue a master's degree was this herd that my sister and I co-owned. So that really launched my career. I've been really blessed to spend time with a group of amazing people in former companies and in my current company. Started in dairy nutrition, kind of made a bit of an evolution into the business side. And I just every day wake up just with the highest amount of respect for the people in the agriculture industry, and for myself, the folks in the dairy and beef industries are just some of the best people in the world, and I'm lucky to work with them.
That's great. I never get tired of saying that, but one of the reasons, in my opinion, why the ag industry is so connected and relationship is something so strong is because most people like yourself are rooted on agriculture. They do work sometimes in marketing, sales. They are producers. They have different positions, but they have this thing on their blood, this love for agriculture. It's just beautiful to see, and they want to stick with it, right? They find ways to work on what they want, what they like, but keeping connected to agriculture.
Yes, I think it's really fun. I participate in some networking breakfasts with the MSU Animal Science undergrads, and I always meet students that are like, I was born in Chicago, raised in the city. How do I get into agriculture? And I think, like, man, that's the most exciting place to be, like a new entrant into this industry. We need that so badly, and new perspectives. And I think you can have that passion whether you grew up around cows or livestock or not. And I think that's pretty cool to find those people.
Absolutely. I'm a city boy. I was born and raised in the city. Had my background in design and communication, but since I joined agriculture, it's been a wonderful world to explore. And so your parents are first generation farmers, as you mentioned. So they are pretty, close to your development as a professional and as a person. And how would you say how would they describe what you did today?
It's funny you asked that because we just had this conversation a few weeks ago, and they said, "Man, someone asked me what you do for a living," and I really had a hard time describing it. I just told them that you're on a lot of meetings and there's some projects involved, and you like cows, and I was like, "Well, yeah, that probably pretty well sums it up." But they're wonderful, but I think I'm lucky to be in a position that's pretty obscure, which is exciting but hard to explain. So.
Cool. Kate, one of the key things that we're going to be discussing here is communication, not only just for awareness of people there, not exactly marketing communications, but really relationship, business development related, how we influence people in the industry, if they are customers or they are like internal stakeholders. But your background is actually in animal science. You have this background in first, in the farm, and then animal science. How did you transition to business development, and how did you develop and master your communication skills with this scientific background?
Fantastic question. I want to disclaimer this by saying anything intelligent I say probably came out of the words of a mentor first. So I'm very lucky to have people speaking truth and coaching me. So that's been really a key part of this learning this new skill. But I think I've always known I'm an introvert, right? So I lean more towards the science side, the technical side, falling down rabbit holes for like weeks on end on certain topics. That's why the carbon market is so interesting to me. Um, but I learned very quickly that to be successful and to move any of these ideas forward and explore them, like you just, like people are a huge part of that. And being able to pitch an idea is hugely important. Um, I'm lucky in the fact that coming out of an undergrad in dairy nutrition, really, and stepping into a role managing a laboratory, the Taysom family took they had a lot of trust in me to just figure it out. And I'm very thankful for that opportunity. But I did realize everything I didn't know very quickly. So it's great if you understand dairy nutrition, you understand forage quality, but if you can't, build a budget and, effectively manage staff and share feedback, it doesn't really matter. We're not going to move anywhere. So from there, I was lucky to join the Urus family in their management trainee program. And they were amazing in the fact that they really focused on developing these skills further, right? Everything from communication to hard conversations to, getting buy-in from a team. They have very specific trainings around it. And I was able to execute those at a very high level, sometimes executive level, every day. This is intense, but we're going to throw you in and you're going to figure it out. And I learned well that way. So that's a roundabout answer to your question, but hopefully I covered it.
Yes, yes. Well, and as you mentioned at the end of your answer, learning by doing, right? It's one of the big things that probably the best way to learn something.
Yes.
And today you mentioned like, okay, the dairy nutrition background. When you're communicating ideas to scientists, if they are veterinarians, nutritionists, or even not only scientists, actually, let me rephrase that. If you're communicating with a scientist, it's okay for you to go deep in terms of the science of things and communicating in a more complex ways. But sometimes you need to communicate these complex ideas to people that do not have this technical background. So how do you ensure that you can communicate complex ideas in a simple way for others to understand?
I think the best way to start is go in with the mindset. I've spent just an absolutely incredible amount of time on this topic typically, and reset and say, but I'm the only one likely who's done that. So out of respect for those listening and participating in this conversation, like it is my responsibility from a leadership perspective, from a teamwork perspective, to communicate this idea in a way that's really short, brief, bright, and gets conversation rolling, right? So that's really how I view the first time I present an idea is it's a conversation starter. And I think that means that you need to come with something, right? It's even if you're starting like a think tank or a brainstorm, like some kind of structure is very important to come with, right? Even if you know it's absolutely wrong. People can work off of an existing piece, but it's hard when it's all gray and everyone's trying to figure out what the end goal is.
When you're communicating, well, when we're just chatting and having like I don't know if that's the best word, like pointless conversation,
Sure.
we're talking, we're learning with each other, but like we do not have a specific outcome. On the other hand, when you're communicating as a business developer, when you're pitching an idea to someone in your team, to someone in a higher hierarchy, as you mentioned, C-level executives and everything, you must have a specific outcome, right? So how to make sure that your communication is always focused on achieving something? And if you could also share an example where you apply this?
You bet. I think if there's ever an agenda, include action item as you're like towards the end of the meeting, and make sure you have time to discuss that and identify who's going to own the action item, what that action item is, when is the due date. Um, just really prioritizing that piece of a meeting, I think, is really important, and that's something I've been really working on over the past year. Right, where do I want to get with this meeting? Who needs to be involved? And, even with external partners, can we just commit to a deadline, even if it's just a follow up, right? Like, hey, give me a month to think through this and get stakeholders involved, and let's re-meet in a month. I'll send you an agenda. We'll go from there. But I think out of respect for everyone else's time on those calls, that's where we have to get, and that's really the mindset I take. Like, folks like yourself, like, gave me time. It's my responsibility to use that wisely and get somewhere with it. But for an example, I guess this is a really basic one, but just with like recurring meetings and catch-up calls, like I always schedule time at least 48 hours in advance or 24 hours in advance, depending on the meeting, to set an agenda, key things I want to talk about, make sure I don't take the full time so that we can talk about what other folks want to, right? But it's important to me that I get an agenda out, get that down. It helps me prep and get in the right mental space for that meeting. And that really helps us get towards, what's our next steps? What are our action items? A lot easier than just going in free-form conversation, right? We only have so many hours in a working day, and we've got to advance some projects.
Absolutely. I feel a lot this, and of course that's the objective most of times on my side as well, like being prepared for meetings. When I'm having customer meetings, we kind of having like a script, like how they go, like understanding the customer problems, then pitching a little bit of our solutions, see if there's synergy. When we go to internal meetings, it's a little bit different. Usually the
Sure.
meetings are not as predictable as a sales meeting. And it's always good to be prepared. But one challenge that I see the team facing, not only the team, myself included, our team as a whole, is that when you start getting to how can I say this? When you start getting to a level where you're having back-to-back meetings and you do not have prep time for those meetings, lots of times those meetings are not as productive as they should be. You get to the end of a meeting where you discussed a lot of cool things, ideas, and everything, but you don't have specific steps. What are the next steps? Actually action items to follow up with, and that is terrible because it's another meeting, more time wasted, less time for you to dedicate to really doing things, and the outcome is not as good as expected. It's not clear, so it's it's something I see a problem in, not only with us. I think that's a problem for most companies today.
100%.
Every time more meetings, more meetings. So at the same time, if you wanna have productive meetings also, and that goes for managers and leaders. Make sure that you have time for to prepare those meetings and not only like filling calendars with meetings after meetings.
Absolutely. And if nothing else, have the energy to be an active listener if you have a booked calendar, right? Good notes, active listeners, still take that 10 to 15 minutes at the end for action planning.
And that goes a tip for anyone that is listening to us out there. Every time more with artificial intelligence and new tools, there's a lot of cool stuff out there for you to help you. Taking notes, summarizing meetings. You cannot rely 100% on artificial intelligence yet. So make sure that you read and have a critic view over those notes and things. But it really we're using this AI tools and for notes and everything, and they can make your life much easier. So just a nugget there. And Kate, we're talking about complex ideas. How do you balance? It's important first, as you mentioned, make sure the people understanding the people on the other side, they might not be as aware of all the details as you are, as you own the message. But at some point, you will need sometimes you'll need to dive deeper in terms of details.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance this? Like owning the details, knowing the things, knowing when to share more details, when to keep your message more concise. How does that work?
I think it's a skill I'm still honing. I'll disclaimer by saying that, but I think we work in slide decks a lot in the corporate world, right? So I'll have my 4 or 5 slides that are really important, right? They're the basic structure, they're the key takeaways, but I usually have a very lengthy appendix amount of slides, right? So if we want to talk about this topic, okay, great. I did prepare some information there, and I think part of being um, effective and something that I feel like I really owe our team is to be excellent at what I do, right? And part of that is bringing all of the information. So, okay, we talked at a high level and potential partnership, but you want to know about this really technical piece, right? I either need to come with that information or I need to follow up and say, hey, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to get that answer, and then actually do it in a timely fashion. So, I'll oftentimes I don't have all the details that are required, right? We're talking about these ideas and what could be in business development, um, but being very committed to knowing the questions of the team that I'm presenting that information to, and being committed to following up, to getting those answers, um, to re-engaging when it makes sense.
Every time when people join our company here, specifically in in sales positions or business development, positions where we're going to be in touch with customers and prospects, there's always this anxiety about, hey, I'm going to have my first meetings or like the first few meetings. I do not own everything, like in terms of message. I'm not 100% on top of everything. If they ask me something, and that's always the tip, like, hey, don't worry. Most time in the first meetings, you're gonna have someone to back you up, and also even in the future, you're not gonna have the answers for all the questions. So if at any point someone asks something you don't know, just make sure to take a note on that. Make sure to follow up with the team, find the answers, and get back to the customer or prospect.
Mm-hmm.
They will respect you for that. Do not try to come up with with an answer if you're not sure about it,
Yes,
but just make sure to follow up and keep track of things.
absolutely, absolutely.
Driving a little bit our conversation towards also communication, but talking a little bit about storytelling. So it's much easier for us to learn new things and understand things when we use stories, right? We are wired to engage and be interested in stories.
Yes.
How do you use storytelling stories in your daily routine, communicating with internal or external stakeholders?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, how do you use this? How do you use these stories to influence people and communicate with them?
This feedback I've had, right, is hey, like storytelling is how people connect. If you really want to sell this business idea or this concept, like put it into a story or an analogy, and that really helps people understand where you're going. And I very much appreciate leaders that gave me that feedback early. Uh, but I think learning how to read a room early is helpful. What's the tone as you step into that meeting? Have they been in budget meetings all day? Are they kind of tapped out? Then they really need a story. They don't want to hear just your very technical idea. Um, but also when it comes to complex ideas, and I'll go back to the carbon market, right? Because that was a recent example of like a group that hasn't had a lot of interaction with that industry and trying to explain insetting versus offsetting, and like you just see eyes glaze over. So saying, hey, let's just pause um, and think about this room, as the dairy supply chain, and then you go from there, right? You're the producer, and you're the processor, and you're everybody in between, and just start to build more of a visual around a concept. It was not storytelling, more so an analogy, but I found that to be really effective with complex ideas. um, you're often going to lose some of the minute details, but we've discussed this, right? You don't need the minute details in conversation one. You just need folks to understand a concept. But it also humanizes a conversation, right? I love hearing stories. Everyone else loves hearing stories. Why would I not work that into my presentations? No one wants to sit through a dry black and white slide deck where you can't really relate. Um, it takes a lot of time, but it's worthwhile, I think.
Absolutely. And as you were explaining, again, everyone, I'm not sure if everyone knows, but in general, people know the importance of stories and how effective they can be. And as you were explaining, You use the word analogy. So doing those analogies, this can be very helpful. That's what I do most of times when I need to, make someone understand the value behind a product and, put some more, put in the shoes of, other people. And one thing that caught my attention as we were explaining, you know, let's imagine you are a dairy producer, this person using
Mhm.
characters. I think that this
Yes.
is very important. There are no stories without characters. Well, at least not good ones in general.
Yes. Yes.
uh, and this helps so much. Like you personalize, you can really see and imagine. Okay, if I'm a producer, okay, this is a little bit of my lifestyle. These are my challenges. That's what I do every day. I think that's a very important thing for us to picture and
Absolutely.
fit scenarios and things into stories.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Kate, another thing that you brought during your past answers was mapping the room, not mapping the word that you used, but understanding who is in the meeting with you.
Mhm.
So understanding the audience is key to effective communication, right? How do you approach tailoring messages to specific audiences? And do you use any sort of tools to do this? One very famous tool, at least in the USA, is Disc for you to understand the profile of people. So, how do you approach this? How do you tailor those messages?
Yeah, I think I've been in rooms where it's a very mixed group, right? So for those who aren't familiar with the DISC profile, we're very high on it at AgSource, within the Eurus family of companies. Your high Ds are your very like be brief, be bright, be done kind of person. I's are your connectors, your extroverts. S's are your they're very concerned about their teams, their people, protecting. And then the C's are your data people. They love Excel. So I think I've been in rooms where it's all high D's, right? And you can really tailor a message to them. Like you may better have like one slide, and you better come with a revenue like dollar amount. But then also, I am lucky to work with a very diverse group at AgSource, where we have much more mixed personalities. So knowing what the sales team needs, they're typically high I. Not to generalize an associated disk type with a position, but we need people that are S's and C's to run our lab. I mean, if we had all high D's running laboratories, I mean, that would be a disaster. We need people that are detail oriented and get data. Um, so all that being said, thinking, either I know their disc profile or I have a guess at what they are really helps me to go into a meeting and say, hey, this person is intent on connecting. What's most important to them is feeling like we're a team, that we're committed to success together. Okay, that's going to be my focus. This team needs the data. So I better do my homework and come with a spreadsheet that I can explain and walk them through very detailed reasoning for why I'm making this proposal or asking these questions. So um, I think it's back to being effective in communicating and getting a result. You get there a lot faster if you communicate at the level that folks need to be communicated on. I like when people do it for me. I want to do it back for others.
Yeah, that's as you mentioned, we should not just generalize. Like if you're in X position, you have a high D or anything like that. But that's something I have to I have to admit sometimes I do, depending on who I'm meeting with, especially when it comes like to sales, is understanding. Okay, like if the guy is on a C level or he's a director, there's a good chance he's a high D. He might be a high I as well, but probably a high D because he's leading teams. He needs to be objective, look for be result oriented and those sort of things. So that always helps. I come prepared, like, yeah, let's try to make the most of his time. Let's try not to waste, be objective. If I'm connecting with salespeople like me, hey, I know we're gonna talk a lot.
Yeah.
Then I try to make sure, like, let me give room for him or her to talk as well. Let's try not to own everything. Yeah, it's interesting how those tools work. Here at Wisenetix, we use something called Culture Index.
Okay.
It's an awesome tool for it. I'm doing some advertising here, but basically it's like a disc, but a little bit deeper in terms of like profiles. And
Okay.
it maps you in four different axes as well, similar to disk, but with some more details, and that helps us not only in terms of communication, but also, as you mentioned, you have someone in your lab, you want someone that has attention to detail and everything. That gives you like lots of information and helps us putting people in the right places in the company. That has changed a lot our approach, not only in hiring, but allocating people in the right positions.
Oh, that's excellent.
Kate, for us to wrap up here, we're coming to the end of our conversation, which I'm loving. Um, One thing that you shared with me in our first conversation was the importance of network, right? As you build your career, make sure to connect to people. Can you talk about a time when your connections played a key role on influencing a specific outcome?
Well, I want to just repeat some words of a mentor that I respect very much first, and the mindset I try to maintain is your industry knowledge isn't necessarily at the end of your career what you have as an asset. It's your network that you've built. So always be thinking, have a curious mind, have an open mind, try to understand where people are at, not only from a business standpoint, but also personal interests. I think building these connections across our companies has been something that I've so enjoyed. Being able to meet others across different opcos and understand where they come from and the context through which they view their business, especially the concept of building culture and leading people. We just have some incredible people, both within AgSource as well as across the Eurus family of companies. So, in these different projects I do, well, my title is business development. I get to work in a lot of like strategic project planning. So that involves, I need to call someone in finance, I need to call someone in marketing, I need to call someone in sales, and we need to figure something out in like a few hours. Um, so having built those connections makes that so much not only easier but more enjoyable, right? Because I'm not just calling finance, I'm calling a specific person that I know and respect, and we've connected. So I just it's really I just have the deepest amount of respect for people and their journeys. So not only do I love connecting from a business standpoint, but I think just understanding people's passion has been really, really interesting and fun.
Absolutely. With our routines every time more impacted and influenced by technology, and I was just mentioning, I don't know, AI tools and those sort of things, I think every time more things will come down to, people relationship, right? And how we deal with this. Sometimes we don't need to have all the answers, but making sure that you know people that can help you get there, as you mentioned, not only knowing you need to connect with someone in finance or whatever the department we're talking about, but having someone you can trust, like, hey, this guy or this person, this girl will help me getting where I am. So connections.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Well, we're wrapping up our conversation here. Thank you so much for sharing great insights with me and the audience. My last two questions. Well, the first one is, do you have any book, movie, podcast, documentary you'd like to suggest to our audience?
Yeah. Let me think for a minute. I big lover of podcasts, a lot of kind of obscure podcasts that tell a story. Um, but from a business standpoint or, relating to the conversation we just had, I really, I think Acquired, I think JP Morgan puts that one out as really interesting. Just long form podcast, telling the story of companies and how they've come to where they are. Um, that one's great. I'll put a shameless plug in for one of my professors at Western Michigan University. They have one called The Jungle, interviewing a lot of local business leaders. So that one's great, especially if you're local to the Midwest. You might know some of these people. Um, as far as documentaries or books, I think there's a lot of different ag style documentaries coming out that we may not necessarily agree with, but I've consumed a lot of them just to say, hey, like what is going out to the larger public? What are they ingesting, and what does that mean for how they view agriculture? So, um, reading and listening to things that maybe you don't agree with really makes you think.
Get out of your bubble, at least to know what's going on in the world. Yeah, that's something important. Even more important nowadays when, as things are getting very, I don't know, Polarized.
It is absolutely the right word.
Just because people think different, it doesn't mean like everyone is crazy and you have the you have the truth within yourself. So
Yes, if you need like a zoom out, refreshing, make you think book, like I could not recommend The Alchemist enough. It's so good. I don't know why it wasn't popular for so long, but it's so good. And it's different than your typical business book. It's like a prophetic.
which book? Sorry,
That's called The Alchemist.
The Alchemist. Okay, The Alchemist. Okay.
But I'll stop there. I could talk about books for many hours. So
Perfect. Kate, last question is where can our listeners find you online in case they want to connect?
yeah, go ahead and look me up on LinkedIn. But my email is kate.chamberlin@agsource.com too. And I'd love to reach out. Like I said, I'd love to meet new people and understand their goals. And if we get partnered, that's the cherry on top. But feel free to reach out on email or LinkedIn. Either platform is great.
That's great. For you that is listening to us until now, thank you so much for your company. Kate's name and last name are here somewhere in the screen, so you can check it out on LinkedIn and also find her at AgSource. So thank you guys for your company, and I hope to see you all in our next episode. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.